Erev Tov.
Good evening. We have the honor to host the chair of the Histadrut, Arnon Ben David. The invitation perhaps is not typical of previous Herzliya conferences, but it's very important. He represents true leadership, I believe, and he's one of the few individuals who has the potential, even though his magazine is a special one, given deterioration we might see here, to resolve the crisis that threatens us. And I won't elaborate further. I'd like to invite the chair of the Histadrut. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. It's not obvious for the chair of the Histadrut, the workers' union, to appear on this stage, a conference that is mainly political security, a serious conference with a long-standing tradition. It's more or less like inviting the chief of general staff to be invited on a conference on the economy and labor law. But I guess everything joins together. Both all is relevant to the economy as well as the social situation, and it's part of the power of this country, because I believe that right now we're facing a certain problem. And I'd like to talk about leadership today, about leadership, Zionism, tribalism, and responsibility. And yes, a few words about the Histadrut. And I can already give you the main theme of what I'm about to say right off the bat. And I'd like to tell you that I've been a public figure for 30 years, representing employees, representing some very serious elements in the Israeli economy. And the social situation in Israel has never been as polarized, dangerous, and problematic as it is today. And we are becoming, in present, progressive into a country of all its citizens, into a country of all its tribes. The secular tribe, the ultra-Orthodox Jewish tribe, the settlers tribe, the high-tech employees tribe, the left-wing tribe, the Ashkenazi tribe, the Mizrahi tribe, etc., etc. And I would like to ask you, have we gone crazy? I'd like to ask you, are we, with our very own hands, destroying the Zionist endeavor, the Zionist ethos, breaking it apart, the ideological basis for the establishment of the State of Israel? What would Herzl and Ben Gurion and Begin say now? If they were to come for a short 24-hour visit here, they would only say one thing. They would say, "You've all gone crazy. This is where you've taken the State of Israel. This is where you've taken the State of Israel to this chaos, to this tribalism, from a country of all its citizens in which everyone must be equal according to the Declaration of Independence, regardless of their religion and race and gender, into a collection of tribes. And every constituency, every group only cares about their own constituency instead of mutual responsibility and equality, and a socialist country that the foundations of this country founded by Ben Gurion on the basis of the Histadrut. This is where it's all come to. We are receiving a polarized society with ever-growing, ever-widening gaps. And instead of investing in infrastructure, in connections, and marching forward, we've gone back to the donations, the allowances funds from the days of the old yeshuv, when a philanthropist would give handouts to the communities living here. And who caused that? Not somebody from the outside. We, with our very own hands, are destroying everything we've built here, everything we've fought for all these years since the establishment of the State of Israel, since the birth of Zionism. What are the values that this country is based on? A light unto the Gentiles, a just and democratic country. I'd like to tell you that ever since I was a child, ever since I was in the Scouts in Tel Aviv, I don't know why, but I've always been interested what people outside of Israel think about Israel. This wasn't an ordinary way of thinking. This constantly preoccupied me, and it still preoccupies me today. How are we viewed outside of Israel in the rest of the world? We're not just any other ordinary country. We're established ex nihilo based on a certain foundation, and if we won't be just, then we simply won't be, because it cannot be a standalone. You cannot bring a set of values that isn't accepted anywhere in the world today. And I'm asking myself today, how do people outside of Israel see us today? And you probably also ask yourselves the same question. And I can tell you that they see us exactly the way we are, exactly the way we look, and perhaps even worse. I speak with leaders of Jewish organizations and unions in the US, in Europe, and other places in the world. People who love Israel, leaders, community leaders, in the Jewish community leaders in the US and in Europe, and they say, have you gone mad over there in Israel? Have you gone completely crazy? They think that we here, the Jews in Israel, they think we have completely gone crazy, and with our very own hands, we're destroying this country that was considered a developed high-tech country, the only democracy, the only stable democracy in the Middle East, and we are destroying it. This is how they see it. And that's not far from the truth. We're there. And if we won't stop, I don't know where we'll get. We've become lepers, outcasts by many countries in the world. Our leaders are not welcome in Western countries. And can you do anything without the support of the West and the US to take any strategic major security measure or step? Well, the answer to that question is clear. The high-tech locomotive engine has been harmed. Foreign investments are beginning to run away from the Israeli economy, from a stable economy, with huge collection surpluses we had here just a year ago. We've become a tribal, deficit-oriented economy without any good news to the combat on cost of living, healthcare, education, welfare, nothing, no good news, nothing good to show in any field. And you know what? And you know why that is? It's not just because of the tribalism. There is no real work plan here. We're all study business administration. You need to have a work plan, a business plan, but this country doesn't have a work plan. And I'd like to tell you that in the past 6 months, all we've been dealing with is the judiciary overhaul. This country isn't being managed. Nothing is progressing on any topic. And I can't even, specify all the fields that the ministers and the different ministries are responsible for. But nothing is happening. Nothing is progressing. Nothing is advancing. Maybe just a few singular things are progressing. All the rest is stuck because everybody is so busy here, first of all, in their own personal survival, the survival of the government, and the judiciary or regime overall, you name it, but I think it's completely unnecessary. This overhaul is ripping up the Israeli society from within. If you want to reform something, you can reform. I've been involved in enough reforms in my lifetime, but destroying everything is not a reform. Maybe you need to add more positions for judges, more employees. Maybe you should work on the processes of reaching verdicts, but don't mess with everything else. Appointment of judges. Is that the most important thing in this country? For 2 judges, we're breaking an entire country apart? Somebody's gone completely crazy here. because it's obvious that the Minister of Justice, even if he doesn't have the reform, his position is the most important position within the committee. And things usually don't happen in contrast to the opinion of the Minister of Justice. And I've spoken with all the Ministers of Justice who served in recent years. Now, let's say that I'm a minister of Justice from a certain party that has primaries, and the law passed, and now we need to appoint judges, and we're before primaries, and somebody comes from this city and he has 3,000 supporters, and he says, my son, my uncle, my nephew is a good criminal lawyer. I recommend him as a judge. So now all the pressure is on you, because if you don't appoint him, then he'll act against you, and you're going to lose these 3,000 votes before the primaries. In a regular situation, you can say to that person, okay, fine, I hear you, please give me his CV, and there's a committee, and the committee will choose. So that helps you take off the pressure. You don't need it. You don't need this thing to be constantly sitting on your shoulder, interfering with your proper work, and at the end of the day, this will result in judges that aren't so good. So this is why I don't understand where are they going. Maybe we need some corrections in the existing method, but it's a good method, a good system, and we have one of the best judiciaries in the world. Let's not forget that. Now, let's talk about leadership, the way I see it, because ultimately it all boils down to leadership. Any decision, somebody needs to reach that decision. The directions of a country, of Histadrut, of such huge organizations, somebody needs to direct the system to where it's going. And the easiest thing is not to decide, and just let things go in the wrong direction and to crush and destroy the systems. I'd like to tell you that the Histadrut, I have wall-to-wall coalition. Except for the religious Zionism, they're all in the coalition, in the Histadrut, in the General Organization of Workers in Israel. And we all sit around one table with one common goal: to protect the workers, to promote, to advance the Israeli economy, to advance the state of Israel. And everybody's friends with everyone. But that's my decision. My decision was to open up the home of the Histadrut for everyone, and for everyone to be partners, and for everyone to understand that we have one goal. And it's no wonder that the Histadrut, which, only 5 or 6 years ago, everybody would speak against it and would try to take a hit. And it's become one of the most responsible organizations, if not the most important organization in Israel, a stable beacon in all the madness that's raging around us. And let me remind you what has happened in the 4 years since I assumed office. COVID, 4 election campaigns, 3.5 years without a budget, without a state budget. That's crazy. Now the judiciary reform, and you need to constantly act and lead this organization, navigate it in this storm, and to navigate it in the right direction. And from all these storms I just mentioned, the judiciary, the legal storm, is the most problematic one, because ultimately it harms everyone. It hurts the insides of the Israeli society. It crushes Israeli society. And there's one thing we need to do. One thing that can put us back on track to stop this judiciary legislation now. Unless they reach understandings in the president's residence. And it seems that could be the case, and if that's the case, great. But if not, let's just set it aside. You've heard the Minister of Defense, the Chief of General Staff, and others, Major Generals who have spoken here, and they are all warning about the security situation. We are not in a good security situation. There's one thing we all need to focus on now, and that's Israel's security situation. And of course, there are other things But with all the restrictions we have and everything else, we cannot continue to isolate ourselves in the world, to continue with the judiciary overhaul that completely unnecessary. And it was born in the fervent minds of the people of the Kohelet Forum. I don't want to talk about them now, but it's a great damage. And one of the other damages they came up with was the nation-state law. And they say because the Druze and Circassians are not included in the nation-state law, and this law was passed as a result of their work. And we're lucky that nothing else has passed now. Did you see their bookshelf? You know, it's all on their shelves, all their books and booklets. But one of them, even one of them, is enough to cause this immense damage. And let me tell you, because you don't know this, it's not from your field of expertise. Over the past 4 years, I've been busy in changing the DNA of all the workplaces in Israel. I've been busy in leading historic reforms for the benefit of the Israeli economy. It's no longer the Histadrut that's always against everything, and they would go on strikes and riot and never promoted anything and would raise and hoist the red flags of the past. We also hoist flags of progress. The reforms I've enacted in recent years, the Israeli water system at Mekorot, the IEC, the Israeli electricity corporations, and the two ports, the two old ones and the two new ones. The recent reform in the train, the Israel train, has been electrified over the past 2 years. They thought it would take 7 years, and then it only took 2 years. Promoting hospitals and the entire hospital sector, the teaching assistants and preschool and in schools, and there was this crazy reform we were responsible for, and it needed so many funds. And now we're also working for psychologists and nurses, and I'm going to address all the sectors in Israel so that they will provide a better service, and so that we can be proud of our public sector, so that it will be in line with high-tech and everything else that's happening. But the only thing is that we need to align the government with everything else that's happening in this country. That's not in my hands. That's in all of our hands. You know, I think that this is a moment of truth. We can no longer continue, and I see what's happening in the streets. It's ripping the people apart. People have gone crazy. You know, they want to close down, to protest, and flags everywhere. I've been in dozens of demonstrations throughout my lifetime, and barricades and strikes, and you name it. If we wish to live, to survive here, to continue to exist, and if we wish to weather all of the threats, and you've just heard all of the threats here in this conference. Some, you know, the Chief of General Staff and the Minister of Defense and our very best ministers and officers. If we wish to weather all that, we need social cohesion. If we continue with tribalism, it will become impossible here. And there's one person who needs to lead this country, who must lead this country, and that's the Prime Minister. And it doesn't matter who the Prime Minister is right now. Just as I'm leading the Histadrut in collaborations and friendships and partnerships and with love, out of a common denominator that we ultimately see what we need to have, what's the best interest of the State of Israel, because that's the most important thing. In the same manner, the Prime Minister needs to get a grip and march this country forward. We have an amazing country. We have amazing workers and employees. People work from day to night. They rush to work. They stand in traffic. They provide for their family. We don't have siesta during noontime like in most European countries. People don't sleep at noontime. They work. They work in order to provide for their families. The Israeli employee is a good employee, but we also need to manage him or her. And I told you earlier that it's not being managed. And when things are managed well, it's managed. But when they're not managed well, they're not. And my job is to help a business be managed. And I do everything I can, whatever I can. And we're going to develop technologies, and we're going to develop the public sector to make sure that this country moves forward. That's within my capabilities. I'm optimistic. I've always been an optimist. If you're pessimistic in my position, you can't move ahead. You can't make progress. I'd like to see the State of Israel, our beloved country, coming out of this crisis, coming out of this unnecessary, redundant judiciary reform and taking all of the resources this country has and the high tech and everything else we have, and so that we make the right connections. And it is possible with the right leadership. We can lead the state of Israel back to track and to become once again a successful country. Thank you very much.